Look, it's just extraordinary. If you put the amount of money that has been spent on these series of legal cases, the folly, every single one of them has been tossed out the back door. Meanwhile, you pass 20 million coronavirus cases and 350,000 people have died.
Yeah, it's a surreal and frankly, I think quite troubling moment in American political history. What we've been seeing is the president and his legal team have presented evidence again and again, and courts have rejected that evidence. Now, what we're seeing in the Senate now is a number of senators, most notably Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, are now claiming, without any merit, that courts haven't actually looked at this evidence, and that what Congress needs to do is to set up its own independent commission to look at voter fraud, similar to one that occurred over 100 years ago in the 1876 election. That's not going to change the result of this election. I think this exercise is enormously cynical. For Hawley and Cruz, it's meant to pave the way for 2024 presidential campaigns. But what we are seeing is a real sustained attack on American democracy, one that won't overturn the results of the 2020 election, but that will have, I think, very serious repercussions in the months and years to come.
There's been some amazing things, like deeply scratching into the Constitution, which was drawn up hundreds of years ago, about getting the military on the streets on January 6th.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing with the president is that as his avenues for challenging this election have closed, he's continued to open up new ones, embracing more and more sort of fringe people. One lawyer, Lynn Wood, was having to tweet last night that he was not crazy, despite calling for the arrest of Vice President Pence. But the president is adamant, despite there being no evidence, that he somehow won this election. And what we're seeing is that he's, I think, embracing crazier and crazier explanations for that loss. And one worrying thing, I think, is that the biggest avenue for overturning this election is January 6th. When that closes, I think the president is not going to drop the idea that he won this election. This is someone who is still obsessed with Hillary Clinton. This is an issue that's going to continue to sort of roil the Republican Party and, frankly, American politics for years to come.
What will happen to him, do you think, Alex? Because he will be out of power on January 20. There's no real way now of him not being out of power on January 20. The larger Constitution will just machine ahead, and Joe Biden will be president. And of course, he's president-elect at the moment. What do you think will happen to Donald Trump?
Well, I think Mitch McConnell and other Republicans have in leadership at least, have sort of hoped that they can start a transition to a more normal or orderly period in their version of politics. But the president's not going to go away. He's going to continue to claim that he won this election and to tweet these kinds of claims. And I think what we'll also see is a large number of Republicans, particularly rising stars within the party, back these claims, not because they have any merit or even, frankly, because they believe them, but because they believe that that's their best avenue towards winning elections.
What about the growing amount of cases that might pile up against him? Because there are, particularly in New York, some pretty grim situations if they progress legally.
Yeah, this is, I think, the big question for the president going forward, is what his political future will be regarding those cases. So I think his instinct will be to wait to announce a 2024 campaign, in part because this is someone we know is in fairly serious debt, who wants to raise a lot of money, certainly not unique among ex-presidents, but his needs are, I think, much greater. But announcing a campaign in 2024 would possibly make his legal troubles easier, because he could then claim that these were sort of politically motivated attacks.
What about COVID-19, the vaccination, the rollout? There was, some fairly optimistic signs that there'd be 20 million jabs done by the end of 2020. That turns out to only be just over 2 million. It's a pretty dark hole situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there are real concerns, certainly talking to folks. The Operation Warp Speed had hoped to, as you say, administer 20 million doses of the vaccine. what we're seeing now is really, of a piece with the administration's entire COVID strategy. There's just a lot of confusion between state governments and the federal government. State governments believe that they're not getting proper guidance, and the Trump administration really just doesn't want to be blamed for these sorts of rollouts. The president, these mistakes in the rollout, the president has already started blaming state governments, particularly those run by Democrats. But there are real concerns right now that millions of doses of this vaccine could expire. Partly, I think that's because state governments are being a little too precious about who gets the vaccine. I think partly it's just an understandable, this is an unprecedented vaccination strategy. It's going to take time to figure out, but especially now that this new strain of COVID has hit the United States, I think people are very concerned, particularly as the death count will almost certainly hit 400,000 before Joe Biden's inauguration.
What is it like on the streets of New York at the moment? It was very quiet. Times Square is usually one of those iconic moments, isn't it, as the New Year's rung in?
Yeah, it was, my first New Year's at home for a long time. I watched the ball drop on television, but even that was rather surreal to see Times Square almost completely empty. It's been very quiet over Christmas as well. It's certainly a very sharp contrast to the way it usually is around this time of year in New York.
Is there a sense of optimism, knowing now that you're in the new year and by January 20 there'll be a change of direction? Obviously, the issues, particularly in and around COVID, aren't just going to be swept away because there's someone else sitting in the White House.
Certainly, I think that this is a very surreal moment because there is this sort of change coming. Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th. Certainly by the summer, it seems like a great many people will be vaccinated. At the same time, what we're seeing now is COVID is really out of control in a great number of places. The positivity rate here in New York has crept up close to 9%. And at the same time, we're also, undergoing probably the most significant constitutional crisis that this country has experienced in a very, very long time. So it's a strange moment. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, and yet at the same time, what we're experiencing is extraordinarily dark.
And 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. Has there been any chinks in the armour as people watch on? Like generally, if you're out in baseball, you've got to go back. Like you're out in cricket in our terms, if your stump goes piling out, you've got to walk back. Yeah, he's just, and it's one of the basic premises in sport. If you're out, you're out. If you lose, you lose.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the way it's supposed to work, but this is not a president who does anything by the rules or whoever admits that he's done anything wrong, or certainly that he's lost, even though he's certainly done that many, many, many times in his life. I think what we're seeing now too is a larger crisis within the Republican Party. You have folks like Mitch McConnell, who I think want to return to the way that the party operated when Barack Obama was president, to obstruct everything the Democrats were doing, but also to make the case that they're the party of fiscal seriousness. Donald Trump has no interest in leading a party like that at all, and also wants to continue to remind Republicans elected and Republican voters that he's in charge of the party. That dynamic is going to define the GOP, and it'll also be one in which Trump will continue to insist that he won the election, even on January 21st, when he'll be sitting as an ex-president in Mar-a-Lago.